It is exciting getting ready for the big 4th of July parade here in beautiful Fredericksburg, Texas. This has become burning with the rebound.
Everyone, welcome to the Fredericksburg Chamber of Commerce.
Please all clap here, 3,500. So they go to your dad.
And we hear that promise again in John's Gospel.
We love living in the country.
When I think about
Husband.
Along the fairways at Lady Bird have a way of slowing life down.
Hey there, well, welcome, Billy fans. This is
on September 25th, 1925.
John
when she sank
Crawford Fritch.
Please join us in keeping Fredericksburg and Gillespie County special. Be Texas friendly. Share the road. Put litter in its place. Respect private property. And protect our dark skies. Thank you for caring about our community.
The community in Fredericksburg is growing, and we know that people choose to live here, and for very good reason. It's important that we have resources in place so that people can take care of themselves, so that our economy can keep moving, so that this community can continue to thrive. And this is our opportunity to help them stay well and stay part of the community as contributing members.
we'll go ahead and get started. If everybody could find a seat, please. All right. We have a really good group this morning. Thanks for being here at Coffee with the City Manager. So for those of you that have looked at the schedule this time, and by the way, you can look at all the dates for Coffee with the City Manager on the website. We're trying to feature either a special presentation or a city department or whatever this group would like to see during coffee, changing it up just a little bit. We're going to be talking with folks from the Hill Country Alliance today about One Water. Anybody in the room interested in water? I'm looking around the room. Yeah, we hear this a lot, so I think you'll find this very informative, very interesting, what the Hill Country Alliance is doing in the Texas Hill Country, not just Fredericksburg, but the entire Texas Hill Country. So we have Marisa Bruno and Grace Gilker with us from HCA. They'll be kicking off. We'll also be talking about a little bit about the new City Hall, talking just a little bit about the budget. We'll have a brief update on a few items related to our police department, public outreach mainly, a few public works items. Let me check my notes here. And a few other things that we'll be discussing with the council coming up throughout the year. But I would like to kick off the program with HCA. This is probably a 20 to 30 minute presentation they'll be giving with plenty of time to answer questions at the end. Yes, ma'am.
First thing I would like to say is that Chris Denise gave a fabulous presentation to Holly, the Osher Institute the other day, and it was really all about the water. Anyway, he gave a wonderful presentation, and I'd just like to say thank you very much. And if you wanted to make him one of your speakers one day, it was a fabulous presentation.
Okay. Well,
thank you very much, Chris.
Chris does a wonderful job and really enjoys sharing all of his knowledge with the community. So he's a huge part of our success with the water equation up at City Hall. Okay, with that, I will turn it over to HCA.
Thank you, Clinton. Can you hear me? Is this coming through at this distance? Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Marisa Bruno. I'm the Water Program Manager at the Hill Country Alliance. This is Grace, my colleague. She runs the Communities Program at Hill Country Alliance. How many of y'all know what the Hill Country Alliance is? I guess show of hands. Okay, good. That's quite a few hands. Well, we're a nonprofit that works across 17 counties of the Hill Country alongside local partners, folks like Clinton and Garrett, to preserve the land, night, skies, and water of the region. And we often work as a sort of convener for the different nonprofits and city leaders that are working on the challenge of preserving our natural resources in the face of unprecedented growth and development. So, I'm sorry, next slide. In addition to the many things we do, we have a new program that launched last year called the Hill Country Leadership Institute. And the goal of that program is to bring together elected officials and city leaders and county leaders together to talk about these things and to learn about the issues facing our natural resources, including water. And this is a picture from last year's cohort. You might notice Clinton is in there somewhere. Councilmember Kirchner is in there as well. And we were talking all about One Water, which is the topic of today's conversation. And an idea emerged from this conversation for cities to pass One Water resolutions, and I promise I'll get to what One Water is. And so, we had this idea for a One Water resolution, and Fredericksburg passed it last year. And that resolution directs staff and the city team to look for opportunities to incorporate One Water in public infrastructure projects and new private developments. So you all have this resolution in place. I don't know, how many people in this room, again, show of hands, knew that y'all passed this resolution? Okay. Well, so what exactly does this resolution do? Next slide, please. I like to start in explaining One Water by talking about traditional water management. And often, in the sort of traditional approach to water management, we've got a set of challenges. The first is water supply. How are we going to get enough water to meet the needs of our people? The second is wastewater, and that is how do we deal with all of the wastewater that is coming through our systems, and how do we get rid of it in a way that complies with the law? And then the third is stormwater. So usually that's done by city staff, and it's looking at how do we put in place measures to make sure that when it rains, we don't have catastrophic flooding. And so you've got these three sorts of challenges that are often dealt with by different departments. And so in contrast to this sort of traditional approach, you've got the One Water approach. And One Water is an approach to water management that basically says, let's look at all of these different water resources, so groundwater, wastewater, stormwater, and let's look at them holistically and think about how we manage them as a system. And so the idea of One Water is all of these different waters have value, and the challenge is how do we put the right water to the right use? So for example, on a golf course, it might not make sense to put potable water on a golf course. That would be like pouring, I don't know, like millions of water bottles on your lawn. But something like treated wastewater might be a good fit for something like irrigating a golf course, which is exactly what City of Fredericksburg does. So One Water, we're thinking about multiple uses, and we're also thinking about maximizing benefits across the board for both community members and the environment. So that is the sort of thinking behind One Water. And then what it looks like on the ground is a lot of different things. So there's a sort of One Water menu. This idea of a menu is created by Robin Gary, who's the One Water coordinator at the New Braunfels utility. But it can involve things like demand reduction, so things like native drought-tolerant landscapes would fit under a One Water strategy, augmenting your supply with non-potable reuse, so treating your wastewater and reusing it in purple pipes, doing things like green infrastructure projects like rain gardens that are not just going to slow and sink water, but also treat it along the way, and then site harvested supply. And that's really going to be the focus of the rest of this presentation, but I'll come back to it. So why is One Water, why does it make so much sense in a city like Fredericksburg? So first of all, y'all are a city that relies on groundwater for your main supply. So you don't have a very diversified portfolio. And so thinking about ways to augment supplies creatively might make sense in the city. You also have a city that's already committed to these sorts of projects. I heard Chris gave a great presentation. Folks like Clinton and Garrett are really thinking about their water strategically. You already have projects in place, which we'll come back to at the end. You are facing drought like the rest of the Hill Country is, and I'm sure you guys know, but for those who don't, this drought that we're in, have continued to be in, is of historic nature. I don't know how many folks realize that it's supposedly the most intense drought we've seen on the historical record. So this is a serious issue. And we're seeing some sort of climatological changes across the board when it comes to hotter temperatures year on year. So there are some challenges, and One Water, this is not to spook anyone out, is part of the solution. And so when we think about One Water and what it looks like to implement it on a city scale, a great sort of first step is this category of site harvested supply. It's looking at ways that buildings can generate their own water via things like capturing your AC condensate, rainwater harvesting, etc. And another way we talk about One Water buildings, so this site harvested supply, is net zero water. And so this is a sort of frame up for the rest of this conversation, and I'll hand it over to Grace to talk about what that is and what that looks like.
Thanks, Marisa. This microphone makes me feel very fancy, so thank you so much. So we've talked a bit about what One Water is, how it differs from traditional water management, a bit about what it looks like in Fredericksburg and the opportunities it can provide to communities looking to secure a reliable water future. So how does net zero play into this? Those are two different words. The short answer is that it is basically presenting One Water ideas for a slightly different audience. Next slide, please. So net zero water is the idea that a development should provide for its own water needs through the capture, storage, and filtration of compatible water sources on site. So it's a little small, but for example, potable water we talked about, surface water, but also AC condensate, black water, gray water, some other sources that we don't always think about can be available in a building, especially if we start thinking about it before the building is built. And it's worth noting that netting out is a goal. It's not necessarily a requirement. And so when we're talking about compatible water for compatible uses, next slide, please. It's worth noting that, black water takes a lot of time and energy to treat. Thank you. Black water would be something that's coming out of your sewage system or like a kitchen sink, whereas gray water would be more the result of like a laundry cycle. So there's a lot more to do in terms of black water to get it to even an irrigation level. So you can see it at the bottom of this list in terms of water quality. And then at the top there, you've got rainwater and condensate, which are cleaner sources from a start point. So there's less you have to do, and it can be cheaper in order to use those water sources for your water needs. And that matching comes through this fancy looking graph, which if anyone's interested and likes playing around, Austin Water actually has a free tool where you can input the different water needs of a building versus the water sources, and it'll pop out with this fun graph. So it's over the course of the year, you've got your different water sources are those lines that go across. So you see that orange bump that goes way up in the summer, that's AC condensate. So above it, those bars are your water needs. So as you might expect, your water needs are higher in the summer. But because you're cranking that AC, you actually have a lot more of a water source that year as well. So the water balance calculator is to make sure when you're doing that water math that you have enough of your water sources, your portfolio, to match the needs that you have to make sure you don't find yourself, to forgive the pun, high and dry. So with that in mind, I think it's maybe more helpful to talk about some examples of this that are already out and about in the Hill Country. And you're gonna have to forgive me for talking about Kerrville. But the Croc Community Center has actually been capturing both AC condensate and rainwater for years. And we actually got to go check it out. We got to climb up on the roof with them, which involved a ladder that was more exciting than I anticipated. But they're saving tens of thousands of dollars. And it is worth noting that in terms of cost, One Water strategies definitely save money, especially over the long term. So they've got a capacity of 40,000 gallons. It meets all their irrigation needs, and because they're doing AC condensate and rainwater capture, they're not subject to the same drought requirements and the drought restrictions that other folks are. So they also are not having to replace their turf or their plants with the same frequency as some other folks might be. So that, I think, is maybe some less talked about cost savings when it comes to net zero and One Water strategies. One more, you have to click it one more time for the title, sorry. One more Kerrville one, and then we'll move on. But the Peterson Regional Center has been operating with AC condensate capture since 2008. They just had a leader, I think, on the board who was really passionate about water conservation. But they use their water both for irrigation and for their emergency non-potable supply. They're saving 400,000 gallons of water a year. And it really doesn't take up a lot of space, which I think is worth noting as well. I think that's a common misconception. And we got to talk to the folks who maintain it, and that lift is not as heavy. I think it's fit very well into the rest of their facilities management. I think most of the gripes we heard were about sprinklers, which I think we can all relate to that. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's a very good point. Kerrville has an ordinance where they won't allow you to discharge AC condensate captured water into the sewage system or into the wastewater system just because it's an additional ask of their system. So there are some folks who are just letting it drain out. However, it is really just, a pot of gold, a water source that folks can tap into. And I do think that is part of the reason that we see more AC condensate capture in Kerrville, since there's just more incentive. But moving away from there to Wimberley, y'all might know about the Blue Hole Primary School. Any show of hands? All right. Yeah, as the name suggests, it's definitely built with water in mind. So they do AC condensate capture and rainwater capture, but there's also a really fun educational element. They've got like a window into all the different pipes and they're labeled for the kids to see. Their rainwater capture has like a fun sort of tube that's transparent in the library for the kids to see when the rain is being captured. So they make it part of the curriculum, but they're saving a lot of money, especially over the long term. And there's also the youth center in Kerrville that's doing, sorry? Yeah, sorry, more Kerrville. Rainwater and AC condensate capture to provide dust control and for cleaning animals. So different water uses, but using a similar water source to get there. There's a lot more about this if you feel like a deep dive in this resource that our partners at Texas Water Trade published earlier this year. It's got more use cases. It's got a bunch of treatment trains. So if you want to see, if I did want to go from gray water to like a non-potable source for irrigation, what does that look like? Some financing vehicles. It's all there. The use cases are super fun. They're mostly from Texas. I think there's one Georgia and one Australia that's really cool because it's like a multi-unit development. But definitely just want to flag that for y'all. We also have some resources on the tables. If you take out your phone, a little QR code action to look into more One Water resources for the Hill Country specifically. I think we can keep going. Maybe just a couple FAQs before we run out of time. In terms of paying for these buildings, we've talked about how thinking about it ahead of time, planning at the earliest part of the design process is key. Retrofits are an option, especially for rainwater capture, but when thinking about more intensive systems, retrofits are certainly like an earlier part in this process. But getting back to deciding which systems work for a property, it's all about that water balance calculator that we talked about ahead of time. But if you're interested in incentives and financial tools, that Net Zero Water Toolkit has more as well. It's not always reliable or financially feasible to do something as intensive as black water capture, but especially as our weather patterns change and we get really intense rain events and then a long period of drought, rainwater capture can go a really long way. And we're all using our AC. So there is a lot you can do with these sources, especially given that in the summer in Texas, up to 70% of our state's water use is for municipal irrigation. So you can go ahead and, try and make sure you're supporting the plants around you and the animals around you and maybe save some money in the process. I think the only thing to mention for permitting, because that can be a scary thing for folks, if you're not doing black water, you don't have to deal with TCEQ, and that is a nice thing in some instances, not to name names. There are still some other folks that you need to keep in mind. Next slide, please. Based on, if you're within city limits, that also might just mean that there's like city level incentives, or I know LCRA has a lot of really great grant programs, but permitting is not always as spooky as people think. And then maintenance, especially for rainwater and AC condensate, you don't have to be, a wastewater engineer. I think there are some folks who are working to develop, especially for, building scale, commercial entities, a sort of training program for instances where it might be nice to have something more intensive or the systems require more attention. But like on a home scale, it's sort of like taking care of a swimming pool. And then I think we want to talk a little bit about Fredericksburg. And Garrett, feel free to pop in if you would like to lead the slide. We just wanted to talk about the good work that y'all are already doing. So in terms of the One Water resolution, we've met with staff before and talked about all the ways that they're engaging with new developers who are coming to town to make sure that they're thinking about native plantings, rainwater capture, AC condensate, whatever might make sense for their development. Implementing rainwater harvesting at the city warehouse. I know y'all are in the process of revising the Unified Development Code. And I mean, we're here talking about the importance of water conservation. And then it certainly sounds like this is an exciting time for Fredericksburg in the context of One Water, so we're really excited to be a part of it. Garrett, Clifton, is there anything y'all want to add?
Yeah, thank you. So we've talked a lot about these concepts, but I just wanted to touch on a few of them. The rainwater collection, as Grace mentioned, it's hard. It's difficult to retrofit a lot of buildings. You know, really the goal would be to start this process early on when you're planning for a new building. We don't have many of those from a city facility standpoint, so we're focused on the retrofits. The fire department just received a grant to install a new rainwater collection system at the South Station, which is on Friendship Lane. So that'll be coming up. The other big one I want to touch on is the revising the Unified Development Code. We're just starting that process, but that's where we can really get into our development guidelines and requirements and look for ways to promote and implement these types of concepts. That way, when these big developers come into town, we can say, hey, look, you know, we're really focused on water conservation. Here's some recommendations or requirements that we have, similar to what Kerrville's done, and it's written into our code. It's not just an ask. We can say, you need to do this when you're developing in the city of Fredericksburg. So, Clinton, anything?
I just wanted to add one more thing, and you've heard us talk about our leak detection being responsible for our water distribution system. Back in 2013, Chris and I got our heads together and started a leak detection program. It was a 3-year program, and we went from about a 12.5% water loss to about a 2% overall system water loss. That resulted in about a savings of about 100 million gallons of water each year. Enough water savings to accommodate 10 years worth of growth so we don't have to go out and develop an additional water supply. That amount of water savings would accommodate about 1,000 additional citizens moving to Fredericksburg. So I just wanted to add that to the list here.
I'm so glad you shared that, Clinton. We just have one more. Yeah, I'm so glad Clinton shared that. Fredericksburg is actually known as being a leader when it comes to water loss. 2% is like pretty much unheard of. So props to City of Fredericksburg for that. So before I talk about what you can do, I just want to really emphasize that the sort of site harvested water supply is a serious source of water. And so as we think about the water supply in the Hill Country moving forward, I encourage you all to think of new buildings and the role that they might play in our water supply. So what can you do? Of course, you all can conserve water in your own home. The easiest way to do that, or the most impactful way to do that, is in your landscaping. Really thinking creatively about how you plant and water your lawns. I'll share that I have put a 5-gallon bucket under my AC drip line and been able to water plants that way. If you can afford it, and obviously it's not, you know, there is a barrier there, considering rainwater harvesting as well to offset your irrigation demands. And there are some programs at the state level that can help with that, though they are somewhat limited, and hopefully that will change in the coming year as rainwater becomes a bigger focus for the state, as I think it will. As the city is working with developments and they're building out new buildings, I think it's good. I mean, you probably don't need to do this in this city, but it's always good to ask the right questions. How are you thinking about the potential for this building to generate water? If you have someone else coming in and building a new development, ask them those same questions as well. And then for those that are more politically minded, call your state reps. There is an opportunity this session to put more funding into water. And so tell them that you want to see more funding go into things like these distributed or decentralized water supply systems. And then for those that want to get even more involved, we do have a newsletter. We put out a water program newsletter once a month where we talk about updates across the region. Sometimes we mention Fredericksburg, sometimes we don't, just depending on how the month goes. And there are lots of local groups here working on, well, there's one in particular I know very well, Deb, with the Pedernales River Alliance, that are working and thinking about water issues. So if you want to get involved with the local group, this might be one you want to think about. And then Grace had the idea to make a short note on AstroTurf. I think a lot of times people talk about the sort of AstroTurf being part of the solution as we think about moving away from just normal turf, grass, water-hungry lawns. But we just want to make a little disclaimer that they tend to become heat islands. And with all the heat we have in the summer, there are lots of reasons to not necessarily consider putting, the fake plastic grass. It also accumulates bacteria, and you need to water it. So there are just some sort of myths, I think, about the role that AstroTurf can play in moving us away from traditional lawns. And this is just our little soapbox moment to say that it's not all green. Okay, so that's it. Questions from anyone? Okay, lots of questions, and Grace, we can get
Guys, if you, just a quick reminder, we are streaming this live, so if you have a question, wait for a mic to get to you.
Okay, real quick, I didn't hear you mention the Hill Country Underground Water Control Conservation Board. That's an elected position, and there are 5 members who are elected each go around for 4 years. And I go there, and there's about 2 or 3 of us from the community that sits there and listens to their deliberations. And it's really important for us to get involved with that and the way things are approved there. So I would encourage everyone to go to those meetings, or at least some of us, and even vie as a candidate for the board.
That's a great point, and y'all have a really great district too, and a really motivated and creative groundwater manager there, Paul Babb. In Hays County, one thing that they've done is whenever someone walks through that door into their groundwater district and asks for a groundwater permit, they hand them a rainwater harvesting guidebook, and they say, would you want to do this instead? And they actually have a moratorium on new development, so you can't actually get a new well right now just because their aquifer is down something like 45 feet. And so they have a particular circumstance, but because the groundwater district is a point of intervention and they are promoting things like rainwater harvesting, we're seeing more and more developments in Hays County that are on rainwater harvesting, which we don't see as much in other parts of the region without the moratorium.
Hi, I'm a retired teacher, and I know that the Fredericksburg ISD just built their middle school, and after it was built, Councilman asked them have they thought about rainwater harvesting? And of course the answer to that is no, because you've got to think about that when you start developing. So my question for Hill Country Alliance is, have you, or would you consider contacting all the ISDs within our area that you serve to let them know that if they have, if they're going to be building schools, how you could help them and how they should think about rainwater harvest as an incorporation in their building. The second thing is that ISDs would probably be more likely to consider doing that if there was a funding source. And if we know how the state's doing with funding of ISDs, I'm thinking that if HCA and other groups could talk to representatives about, if you are a Robin Hood school district and you are sending money to the state, money that could be used for rainwater harvesting programs and water conservation could be charged against the money that is sent by ISDs that are required to recapture, that could be charged against what they have to send to the state. So this is, we all know that it's all political, and like the Fredericksburg Independent School District is sending off $30 million every year. Okay, so that.
Wait, I'm going to lose your questions because you.
Okay, my question is how politically active on an independent school district level has HCA, or would HCA consider to become at least getting information out to ISDs, because we think of schools. Schools are big. There's a lot of area there for rainwater harvest.
Sure. Well, before I get myself in trouble, is anyone here on the Fredericksburg ISD? Okay, then I will share that we did reach out to the new middle school when it was being built. 3 years, yeah, many, many years ago. Our board member put out an op-ed in the newspaper. The challenge we face in having the school implement rainwater harvesting is exactly what you mentioned, which is that there is an additional upfront cost to these systems. It is, I think, in the grand scheme of things, insignificant compared to the overall cost of the project. You know, it'll be like a fraction of a %. But it is meaningful, you know, when we talk about something like a $200,000 investment. And so that can often be a challenge. You're exactly right. What Grace said a couple of times is that these investments tend to pay themselves off, or they do pay themselves off in the long run, but it's hard when you're very budget conscious. And so in some ways, what we almost need to see is a cultural shift where the community is asking for these things and is understanding of the fact that this might be $200,000 more to build this school. Again, a fraction of a multi-million dollar project, but it is gonna cost more upfront because it will pay dividends. We have tried to reach out to ISD members. We could be doing a lot more. They are not a sort of group that we have targeted with specific programming, but it's definitely on both of our radars. As far as the policy opportunities, we're also thinking about that. And I like this idea. I'll talk to you after because I hadn't thought of that before. Clinton had some good ideas too about hot tax. So we are thinking about ways the legislature can make it easier to find funding for rainwater harvesting systems because it is an upfront investment. We're thinking about it and we're open to other ideas if folks have them. I don't know if you want to add anything else.
I think that's what I would say.
Okay, yeah.
Tom, we did. We tried. HCA reached out to me and a few other folks well in advance. They armed us with the One Water project in Wimberley. I called on school board members. I called on the superintendent. I delivered packages to them. I worked with the architects to try to integrate a AC condensation recapture and a rainwater recapture and got nowhere. I wish somebody were in the room from the school district.
I think maybe the only thing I would add to that is folks have asked us in the past if we can get in front of architects and designers and encourage them to share these ideas with their clients and their potential clients. And the response that we've gotten from those folks so far is it's not really our place. We'll be happy to do it if our clients ask us. But we haven't had as much success with that population. So you're right, these are the right folks to target, the clients themselves.
Sorry, there's something back.
So along that same line, have you targeted HOAs in the legislature? Because they have a lot of power to rule around landscaping and plants and whether you can put a rainwater capture system in open view, turf, all those kind of things. You know, they were overruled with roofs a few years back for the same reason. So I just wondered if that's something you're looking into.
I can say maybe not on a legislative level right now. However, Maurice has been working really hard all year on a new resource for HOA folks who are interested in committing to One Water practices, not just existing HOAs, but new HOAs as they're building their covenants.
Yeah, well, and I'll talk about the legislative question too. So there was that bill passed in 2015, 2016 that made it illegal for HOAs to ban the use of rainwater harvesting and water-friendly or drought-friendly plants. And so they can't say no outright, but it's true. We got a lot of complaints from people saying, okay, my HOA can't ban me from doing rainwater harvesting, but they're out there telling me it's got to look a certain way, it's got to be in a certain place, and so they're basically banning it. I don't really know what the solution is for that, because in some ways that is the purpose of HOAs, is to preserve an aesthetic sort of similar, you know, common aesthetic. But it is a challenge we hear a lot about, so maybe also we're thinking about that one. In the meantime, like Grace said, we're thinking about ways to work with HOAs and outreach to update their landscaping guidelines so that when folks are updating their landscaping, they are looking at the more sort of latest and greatest when it comes to drought-tolerant landscapes.
Excuse me, the easiest, as an architect,
yeah.
the easiest way to implement this
is to make it a code requirement. When anybody builds, so I encourage the city of Fredericksburg to get on that. I know Chris has mentioned during that seminar that the city is considering it, making a code requirement. But quite frankly, across the state and every city, if it's a code requirement, the HOAs will have to comply, and you could even make it retroactive with solutions. And then new builds, definitely a code requirement would get the attention of the architects, who obviously, if they're not listening, that's a crying shame. And it would get the attention of developers, would get the attention of everybody, but it's got to be a code requirement before it will be put into action.
Yeah,
So
that's a good idea, and it's true. I think it was Garrett who mentioned it. And by the way, Garrett is also in the Leadership Institute this year, and so is Councilmember Bobby Watson. Sorry I didn't let folks know that you were in that earlier. We have some examples of developments that in their deed restrictions are requiring rainwater harvesting. A lot of new development is happening at the county level. And as I'm sure you all know, counties have very limited authority to actually manage what happens in these developments. And so that's a big part of the challenge. In cities, we do see some communities starting to implement ordinances. So City of Austin, this is a big number, for buildings 250,000 square feet and larger, they have to do reuse within their buildings, but again, that's a really big building, and so it would be interesting to think creatively about what it looks like in a city like Fredericksburg, where we're not really seeing these large-scale buildings, and we're mostly talking about retrofits. But I know that y'all are thinking about these things in your Unified Development Code.
Real quickly, if one were to retrofit their home here in Fredericksburg, would the city consider some sort of a credit or reimbursement, or how would that process take place? Yeah, well, all right, there's always one.
I don't know if you want to answer it.
Well, I will say that the cost to retrofit my home for rainwater catch, which with 5,000 gallons worth, I sized that so that I could water for 10 weeks during the summer and keep some grass alive with it. And I also planted 7 trees. And I think part of your analysis should include how trees affect the amount of water that's needed to keep whatever vegetation you have alive. And there is optimal trees for this area, and they capture water in a way, and it probably should be part of the modeling. But my point is, it costs less for me to add my rainwater catch than my tree.
Wow. Clinton, how are we doing on time?
You're fine on time. I just wanted to mention that in terms of offering incentives or maybe a break on your utility bill for rainwater harvesting, we've considered doing something like a discounted rate, but when you look at the cost of a system, the impact or the time it would take to pay for something like that based on just a reduced rate is very long term. So really what I think we'll probably eventually end up doing is trying to find funding to help people that are interested purchase and install these types of systems. Probably not a break on the utility bill, but funding, maybe even state funding that's available. I'm not aware of any currently, but helping citizens purchase those, helping with the installation and so forth. It is something that we do support, we do believe in. Water conservation in general, no doubt. So that's just one more piece that we talk about often.
Excuse me, I don't believe in subsidies at all. I mean, basically you're going to install something which saves you money.
Right.
So I don't want the city or the state to be the bank. If you need to loan some money to install a rainwater collection system, go to the bank and get a loan. But basically, over the long run, you're saving money by not having to use potable water for irrigation. I've installed a rainwater collection system. It cost me less than $2,000. I've never used potable water again for irrigation. I've always got plenty of rainwater. If you need to come and see what I've installed, I'd be happy to show you what I did for less than $2,000.
Yes, I'd just like to say the aquifers in the Hill Country are kind of the unsung heroes for rainwater catchment, the natural way, and the Pedernales Valley is really a great catchment area, especially for our Ellenberger aquifer, which the city does produce from. There are parts in the Hill Country which are not blessed like we are, where a fraction of the water, a very small fraction of the water that falls on the ground actually goes into the aquifer. I just wanted to throw that out because the whole story of One Water needs to also include how naturally we store the water through our aquifers and our riparian environments too. So water doesn't, it's one of these things that who owns it, it depends on who's breathing it right now or drinking it right now. It's really part of the entire ecosystem of our Hill Country. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. We have a board member who loves to say aquifers are infrastructure. And it's true, not all aquifers are made the same, and y'all are on the Ellenberger San Saba, which does recharge, and it's a great water supply reservoir. I think, Cody, you've had a question for a while. If you want to say it, I can repeat it for the live stream.
Yes. Can we get a mic over here, please? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cody Salwin, and I did have one question about the examples that you gave. Of those, how many are public water supply systems? And if any, what challenges did they face permitting public water supply?
So Cody was asking about public water supply systems. Those are only if you're going to be using the water supply for potable use, and there's only one example so far in the state of a system that is entirely built off rainwater and is a public water supply system. That's Shield Ranch, which you're familiar with. There's a new development in Bandera that's trying to do it. So it is a senior affordable housing development in Bandera where they're having a lot of issues with groundwater. And so the developer is committed to being fully on wastewater reuse and rainwater harvesting for the I think 120 protected homes. So they're really thinking creatively. But a lot of this is uncharted territory, and so it requires, honestly, a nonprofit like Shield Ranch to charge ahead and make a path for those that will come after.
I'll be quick. Grace, you talked about an upcoming summit with county commissioners. Did I understand that correctly? I'm just outside the city. Again, this is a broken record. Try to tell people, my neighbors, there's not a fence on the aquifer at the Fredericksburg city limits. We all have to stop planning in a vacuum. What can you do at that level to convince county residents that we've got to participate not only in these conservation programs, but in long-range planning?
Well, I would say we've had 2 of these county-to-county workshops this year. So about 50 or so county commissioners in the Hill Country and some county staff. And I would say that those folks in many ways share your view that they do have limited tools, and they are, I would say, struggling to educate, because that's probably among their strongest tools in their toolkit. However, having folks from a similar rivershed or a similar watershed together talking about how different county and different GCD operating methods impact each other. I don't think those folks often have those opportunities. So I think that's been very fruitful and been maybe the most compelling place for creative solutions. But I would say in terms of tools, folks are in many ways using the existing tools that they have. Some folks are maybe hesitant to use some of the existing authority they have, either because, you know, they might not have a huge budget, they might not have a lot of staff, or they might be afraid of a potential lawsuit. So I think that's an evolving space as well.
Yes. Yeah, Judge Jones is in the cohort as well. And so in our Leadership Institute, we have folks from the so Paul Babb is also in the cohort, so that's an opportunity for folks at all levels within Gillespie County. But there's this question about long-range planning too, across county boundaries that I think you asked. Gillespie County is a bit weird in that as far as groundwater planning goes, it's not part of GMA 9, which is the one that a lot of the other Hill Country counties are in, and you know, that's just in some ways a fault of the system we have for long-range planning. But I would say showing up to the meetings, the groundwater meetings, and asking questions like, are you working with neighboring GCDs? Where is our recharge coming from? Are you working with the counties where our recharge is coming from to preserve land? I think asking questions at these meetings is a really good place, and not coming in there with opinions, but again, just asking the right questions.
Excuse me, this reminds me of how the low flush toilets got started, and how the washing machines, right, that are now the front loaders that are now very low volume water usage. This is how that, I mean, what you're going through right now and trying to get people to pay attention is what happened with the toilets. And that obviously what was 10, 15 years ago. And it all started with a code requirement. And to Scott's point, it also started with an incentive. If you installed a low flush toilet in your home, or you retrofitted when you bought a new house, you retrofitted the house with a low flush toilet, you got $100 back or whatever. And maybe what we've done in our house, besides the low flush toilets and all that stuff, is at each one of the gutters, we've installed a 150-gallon water catchment tank. And so we have had 3 times we have been able to empty those tanks, you know, for watering our yard, and we've also put in a lot of xeriscape. But my point is that you can easily, as a homeowner, retrofit where your gutters come off, where they just go right into the sewer system, take them and put them into a catchment tank. You know, different parts of your home where the gutter system comes down. It's very simple, really easy. But again, it goes back to it's going to have to be a requirement.
That's an interesting.
Incentivized.
We have something called the Leading by Example Guidebook, which is a list of different ordinances that are great examples for the region. Again, things are not one size fits all, but we do have one on water-wise landscaping that gives examples of how the city of San Marcos, for example, is requiring certain sorts of plants, for example. So on new builds, you have to choose from a specific plant list. You can't just use St. Augustine grass, for example. And also, City of Austin has a requirement that only 50% of any new commercial buildings can have turf unless they do rainwater harvesting. So there are some really good examples of things like that. And in Las Vegas, they've actually banned non-functional grass. And so non-functional grass is, if you are gonna sit on it and roll around with it and play with it on your front lawn, like that's totally fine. But the grass, like in the medians, for example, on roadways that's irrigated and serves no function, no one's going to lounge around on it, that's been absolutely banned. And so there are some sort of interesting examples at the national level. And I like this idea, or what you're mentioning about the sort of Lone Star program, low flush toilets, and looking at that as a potential precedent. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, great job.
Thank you, Clinton.
Thank you. Okay, Chris, do you have any additional public works updates? Since we're talking about water, I thought we might shift to a couple of project updates. Chris?
Well, sure. Can you hear me? Yeah, good morning. So timely with the presentation this morning, I thought I'd share some of the projects that we have in the budget related to water this year. Obviously, that kicked off 16 days ago, so we're in the mindset of planning and getting those before council for approval to move forward with them. Firstly, I want to mention that we completed our water master plan. It included a wastewater and reuse master plan in 2017. We have an update to that master plan in the budget this year. So again, that master plan is our roadmap to a lot of the capital projects that we do on a yearly basis. It projects out 20 plus years. So again, updating that is important for us to look at those future projects. In addition to that, once we complete that update to the master plan, we'll look at our rates again. This is something that last increase was in 2019. So again, looking at the rates and making sure that we're in line, but also using that rate structure as a conservation method and various things as well. And then our impact fee study. The state requires us to look at impact fees every 5 years. So we're due for that update. But again, we need those CIP projects to be able to complete that update. A couple other projects. Clinton talked about water loss. We've prided ourselves and done a lot of projects related to water loss. We have some more projects next year related to that. One is the North Llano water main replacement project. So if you drive on the northbound lane, outside northbound lane of North Llano, you can see all the locations that we've had to dig up and make repairs. As part of one of those repairs, we actually found some pipe that was stamped 1935. So our system was put in 1936. We know that's part of the original system that was put in. It served the community well, but it's time to replace that water line. So projects like that, we continue to look at, work with TxDOT, that's all of their right of way, so partnering with them and getting that replaced before they obviously do a mill and overlay or resurfacing of that pavement, which they currently don't have on their books, but we also have a large stormwater project in that area, so we would anticipate at some point in the future TxDOT putting that on their schedule for replacement. A couple other projects that, let me see, related to water. We have our third phase of our leak detection survey. So again, we've divided our water system up into 3 different areas. We've done the first 2 areas previous years. We're in our third phase of completing that. It's a little over $50,000 for that project. And then a couple of other projects just to mention that you see on the city side and relocating from a lift station. Also beginning probably later this year, early next year, you'll see our contractor, JM Pipeline, installing some lines out West Live Oak. That's part of an annexed property that the city council annexed about 4 years ago, and we are extending those water and sanitary sewer services to serve that annexation. And then last but not least, the rainwater harvesting. So the volunteer fire department did receive a grant from LCRA. Garrett mentioned that rainwater harvesting system being done over on Friendship Lane. So we're working with the fire department and will likely assist during the construction of that from a project management standpoint. So any questions about any of those projects? Kind of went quickly through them. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chris. And again, really just to hammer our very low water loss home, the average rural city in the state of Texas has a 50+% water loss. So they lose half of what they're pushing out into the system. There is a lot of state funding available to help those communities make those repairs, get engaged in a program similar to what we have here. That water conservation is going to be key to the future growth of the state. And I always give these facts and figures coming out of the state water plan. The state of Texas population is expected to grow 80% over the next 50 years. If you draw a triangle between Dallas-Fort Worth down to San Antonio to Houston, 75% of the growth is expected to be in that triangle. We're right on the edge of that. Some people would argue that half of that growth might come to the 17 hill country counties, the counties that make up the Texas hill country. People moving to the state of Texas, people retiring, this is the place people want to be. So a lot of demands on water. We'll continue to talk about water. We'll continue to be good stewards of our water supply, our water system. We'll continue to implement these innovations into everything that we do. Every little bit helps, certainly. So thank you to HCA for helping us think more broadly, helping all Hill Country communities understand the issue and understand some of the tools in the toolbox to help with those water supplies. PD update, Alyssa.
Good morning, everyone. Since our last coffee with the city manager, PD has been very active in the community, as always. We had our national night out on October 1st. We really appreciate those neighborhoods who came together and celebrated and invited us to come and really promote safety within our communities. And then following National Night Out, we also had National Coffee with the Cop Day at Java Ranch. That was a fantastic turnout as well. Thanks to those of you who came out. Coming up on October 26th, that's this Saturday, from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, we are having our National DEA Drug Take-Back Program. This is a great program for those of you who may have either had a loved one pass away or you have a pet that has medications that you have stored in those bathroom cabinets and you need to get rid of. So along with our water conservation, we don't want those expired prescriptions and everything to go down our toilets. So this is a great way to get those prescriptions taken care of because we collect them anonymously and they go straight to DEA to be disposed of properly. So anything that is unwanted, unused, or expired prescriptions, bring them on out to the Law Enforcement Center on October 26th from 10 to 2. And then an event that we're really excited to announce is our casino night. I know, police department casino night kind of sounds a little funny, right? But this is in promotion of our police department foundation fund. On November 15th, we are going to have our casino night fundraiser out at the Hangar Hotel. And it's a great opportunity for you to come out, enjoy, maybe have a date night or something. And there's gonna be, obviously, gambling, but within reason, 4 raffle prizes, okay? Everything's legal, all is good. If you or your business would be interested in sponsoring one of our game tables, please let me know and we'll get you set up. But this is a great opportunity to help our officer housing campaign. It's a really great push at the end of the year to hopefully have some of our officers not only be recruited, but also retain them in Gillespie County. We have this really great opportunity with Create Healthy that they have given us to have a $25,000 matching grant. So if we bring in $25,000, Create Healthy is going to match that, dollar for dollar. So come out to casino night on November 15th out at the Hangar Hotel, and more information to come.
Thank you for that update. A lot of good stuff coming out of the police department, a lot of community outreach. So New City Hall, just quickly, we have moved all board and commission and council meetings to our new City Hall located at the old University Center building. We will continue to have council meetings through the remodel construction of that facility. There's a sign up front as you drive into the old University Center property that has a QR code on it that you can scan and get regular updates on our construction process, any special meetings that may be going on. If you're interested in keeping track of our construction schedule and when we might be moving in out there, run by there, scan that QR code. You can also get that information directly off of our website. We expect to be in there probably mid-year next year. We are converting a lot of the classroom spaces in that building into office spaces, permanent walls, and so forth. So we're working through the plan right now. Garrett's and Sean they're both playing a huge part in that, trying to locate departments where citizens can have access to them, a lot more efficient, a lot more effective operation. I think it will serve the citizens of Fredericksburg much better. Eventually, we will likely have a drive-through utility bill pay system out there. Still have the ability to make your payment at City Hall likely, but a lot to come with the new City Hall. Pedestrian bridge ribbon cutting yesterday. Sean, you said you had a couple of photos up behind me. Okay. So pedestrian bridge, Garrett, do you want to talk about funding for the bridge, the time it took to get all of that done, those involved?
Sure thing. So hopefully you all know where this is. This is along South Llano, connecting Creek Street over to Ufer Street and then around to the recycling center. This is a project that was, I guess, contemplated back in 2008. At that time, it was just going to be a creek crossing, at grade, but ADA-wise, that didn't work. So in 2015, there was an adopted sidewalk plan that included this bridge concept. We started applying for funds in 2017, so 7 or 8 years ago. We didn't get funding the first time. The second time in 2019, we were approved for funding, but then COVID happened. So finally got the funding in place around 2022. TxDOT awarded $902,000 for this project. The adjacent developer to the west contributed $100,000 as part of a development agreement with the city. So overall, I think we're looking at around $1.5 million total project cost. So pretty expensive project, but we're excited because it opens up the south side of the creek. Before, there really wasn't a good pedestrian connection. There's a lot happening around Old Fair Park. The peanut factory site is potentially going to be developed, and with all the restaurants that are developing. So we're hoping this is kind of the start of a larger project. We'd like this to be kind of the trailhead for a potential creek trail. We've also extended sidewalks across Old Fair Park. So I know the parking situation at Old Fair Park isn't the best, especially when baseball and softball games are going on. So now there's a little better parking on Park Street. You can kind of get around the park from there. So appreciate the council's support. This is multiple councils that have been involved in this project, and all the patience involved from the public, because it does take some time. But I don't think this project would have happened without that federal funding. So again, thanks to TxDOT. Overall, just happy to have it completed.
Thank you for that. Anybody in the room from San Antonio Express News? Okay. Anybody read the story about the city of Fredericksburg increases taxes by 25%? Anybody read that? I just wanted to clarify quickly that we didn't increase your taxes, overall taxes, by 25%. Let me rewind back to last year when we actually reduced the city tax amount about 25%, maybe a little bit more. Over the course of last year, we worked really hard to look at every single line item in our budget, and we created a lot of efficiencies, a lot of budget savings. We implemented a lot of things that we'll continue to work on to reduce that overall impact to every taxpayer in town. This year, we did increase the tax rate just a little bit, about 3 pennies from 16.5 up to about 20 cents. That's a very low tax rate. When you look at the city's portion of your overall tax bill, that's about 13%. So we increased that portion by about 25%. For the average home in town, $450,000 home, I'm not sure that's the average anymore. I think it's probably closer to $700 or $800, but for a $450,000 home, what that results in is about a $200 per year increase in your taxes. So of the $800 roughly tax bill, we've increased that a couple of $100 per year. So again, the city's portion is only 13% of that overall tax bill. We did add a number of staff, 12 full-time employees to our payroll. 6 of those are fire EMS employees. And I will tell you that we're working very hard at the front end of the legislative session, the 25 legislative session, trying to use more dollars flowing into the community from our visitors to help pay for the services that they enjoy, that you all pay for currently, that is PD, fire, and EMS primarily. So we're working very hard on utilizing a different revenue stream to help cushion that contribution that the community has been making for a long time for those services. Wanted to also mention that we have started doing a weekly radio spot with 99.1 The Buck out of Kerrville. It's at 1 o'clock on Thursday. I am there just about every week. We typically have a staff person from a city department there. We're trying to pull council members into that radio spot. If you're interested in learning what's going on, what's coming up, just another method of community outreach that we're fortunate to be able to take advantage of. We'll talk about council meetings. I talked about murals the first time that we sat down. I know PD has been part of that program, so listen in if you're interested. 1 o'clock every Thursday, 1 o'clock p.m. Did have a regular council meeting yesterday. I had a list of special meeting topics for the council to consider discussing before the end of the year. Some of these items might be of interest to you. First of all, discussion about fire EMS operations. How many employees do we have for any kind of call going out of fire EMS? What apparatus is going out to address that call? Employees involved? What does the 5-year plan look like? 10-year plan look like countywide? As we see an increasing cost, increased number of employees needed to service not only our local community but our visitors, we have to have a very solid plan moving forward. We have to plan financially to cover those costs. So if you're interested in learning about everything fire EMS, we're trying to schedule a meeting in early November. It will likely be out at the new City Hall, but come out and listen into that. It'll be a joint meeting between the City Council and the County Commissioners. Additionally, we will likely be also talking about the same day with the Council and the Commissioners discussing a tax increment reinvestment zone primarily for West Main Street. Again, this is a funding source that a lot of cities across the state use to fund infrastructure improvements in underutilized areas such as West Main Street to try to incent development. So when we look at West Main Street, there's not a lot of business activity down there. We're trying to capture the relatively low valuations of some properties before development happens, capture some of the taxes off of the incremental valuation increase, again, to invest back into that area. The council has not made a decision to move forward with this. We're doing a feasibility study currently. We will wrap that up probably within the next month or so, but if you're interested again in learning about that, early November meeting we'll be discussing that. We'll also be talking about an art board or an art commission. Everybody familiar with the mural and the big social media explosion that the mural and I'm going to call it a communication breakdown, really, caused. And as you may be aware, the Historic Review Board denied the mural, and the Zoning Board of Adjustments overturned their decision, so it did remain. But there is some interest in doing more of these around town. I am originally from San Angelo, which was designated the visual arts capital of the state in 2022 for the next 10 years. They have a very strong mural program. I think there are a lot of good examples out there that we can follow to put something together. Let art-minded professionals make decisions regarding the location and appropriateness of some of these things, and maybe have the council make the final decision, again, based on a lot of good professional input. So that's another thing we'll be talking about. Annexations, we have a lot of potential annexations coming up. Some new legislation out of the last session allows property owners to pursue annexation along state and county roadways. So that was a little bit different than the previous legislation. For instance, Arch Ray out 290 East could potentially request annexation from the city limits using 290 East to come in. There are a number of folks that are asking questions. We want to give the council a very comprehensive update on who's asking, what the legislation looks like, and what some of the potential 25 legislative changes may be. I wanted to end with Fredericksburg Citizen University. I did have one question in the back. I know we have one person in the room that's involved in the two. I'm sorry, Cheryl. Ms. Krenwilge. Anybody else part of Fredericksburg Citizen University? We have about 20, I'm going to call them students, going through the program. We had about 40 applications. It's been a very good program. If you want to learn all about the operation of the City of Fredericksburg department by department, it's a really good opportunity. We had about 40 applications last round for this 11-month program. I think the individuals that are involved, I see Connie shaking her head, have learned a lot. Completely different understanding maybe of how the city operates and what it takes to make a city operate, not just financially, but people-wise, and some of the challenges that we face, water being one of the many challenges that we face. So that program will be wrapping up next month. We're talking about when to post that application for the next class now. So expect to see that. We'll publish it in the paper. It'll be on the website. It'll be on social media. We'll push it out. We're trying to have a slightly larger class. We can accommodate a slightly larger group now. So we'll probably choose about 30 individuals. I will say that some folks that are involved in that program are on boards and commissions now. If you're interested in running for council, for instance, or getting on the Historic Review Board or whatever the case may be, that is a pretty good conduit for you to get involved, learn, and make your final decision whether you want to do that. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have about anything we talked about today or otherwise. I will start right here.
I think you brought up this one time before a while back. Sidewalks on Milam between Schubert and Travis where the bridges are. We get a lot of foot traffic through there, especially since Central or Milam on Central is opened up now and everything else, especially at nighttime is dangerous. Any idea if that's sidewalks there? One. Two, do you know what I'm talking about? The bridges? Okay. And then two is there anything about repairing or doing some kind of overlayment on all of our downtown historic district sidewalks downtown on Main Street? Three, the property across from HEB that is now cleared off next to the new bridge and everything else. Four, a value.
Just three. Let me start with three. I'm going to pull a Marisa here. Hold your fourth question. Let's talk about the first one. We do have plugged into the budget $150,000 for new sidewalks and sidewalk repairs. Back in the day, Garrett and I many times walked Main Street. We identified originally 165 ADA issues that existed. We have addressed a lot of those issues through this sidewalk program. We do have some sidewalk projects plugged into the budget. Chris, help me out. I know we have one up to Cross Mountain. I don't know specifically along Milan regarding the bridges that you're
well, and just real quick, that's a larger discussion along Milam. There's all sorts of issues. It's not just sidewalks, it's the drainage. So we're working with TxDOT on a larger program, like what's their long-term plan for Milam. I will say the bridge there over, I guess that's Town Creek, part of the problem is the width of the bridge. So it might have to be a standalone structure to allow for a sidewalk crossing.
So Don, the Main Street sidewalk surface issue we're aware of, and again, we're trying to address those ADA issues, specific ADA issues. I will say that this tax increment and reinvestment zone could help in terms of funding additional improvements beyond that $150,000 that's in the budget. In terms of the piles of dirt that are missing now, have been removed or knocked down on the lot across from HEB. It is my understanding that a hotel developer has purchased that property. So we're going right back to the original concept, which going back to Hammock, the developer that contributed the $100,000 for the pedestrian bridge. They had also proposed a hotel, I think about an 85-room hotel, something like that. So there were two hotel developers that were interested in that property. The property owner selected one, and it's my understanding that they've purchased the property and will be moving forward with the proposed hotel right there. Your fourth question?
I see some people walking around inside the old Max Barbecue on Main Street. Is there anything, do you know what's going on there, or?
I do not.
Okay. And then the last thing.
Garrett, do you have any update on the, or Chris?
There's a potential user for a portion of the space.
Okay.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last thing is the value of our dark sky. I don't know if how many people watched the comet last night, but it was visual, except the moon kind of got in the way because it did not participate in the dark sky part. But yeah, but anyway, it's tonight you'll be able to probably see it again, but it's pretty cool. Anyway, thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.
What happened with Archway?
As far as?
Well, we had the big meeting. I missed what happened with Archway in terms of
You're talking about their
wastewater?
Wastewater effluent discharge permit. And just to clarify, they weren't proposing to discharge wastewater into the river. It's treated effluent. But I think they're still weighing their options right now. They have been in contact with the city regarding annexation. We just provided a cost for running utilities out to that site, sewer utilities out to that site. They would be responsible for the majority of that cost. So I think they're weighing those options right now. Chris, do you have any other update on that? I know that you provided some of that information.
I'm going back
Yes,
to
ma'am.
West Live Oak. I live on the corner of Alfred and West Live Oak.
Yes, ma'am.
And you have done a beautiful job of sidewalks, but in my front yard, it quits, and I just have a blob of cement. It's called a landing. Is there any hope that I will get a landing that will go somewhere?
Let us take a look at that. I'm not familiar with that particular intersection right there.
Yeah.
I believe the original intent was to extend it over to Milam, but that might be part of next year's program.
Oh, okay. I just.
Kind of a phased approach.
If we could get your contact information, we can look at that and get back to you.
Yeah. Well, it would have been better if I hadn't had a blob of cement at all. So I'd just like to see where you're going with that. Okay.
Real quick, one other thing. I know a lot of y'all are involved in nonprofits and volunteer organizations. Yeah. So the hot funding process is about to kick off again. So we will have the orientation meeting on Thursday, October 20th. Not working? We'll have the, there it is. We'll have the orientation meeting on Thursday, October 24th at 2 p.m. up at the current City Hall in the Fire Department training room. The deadline for annual financial reports is Thursday, November 14th. And the application deadline will be Friday, November 15th. And again, if you recall from last year, we kind of reset the clock. So we only funded a portion of the events for this year. So now we're actually going to be using funds that we take in from the previous year. So we'll be using fiscal year 24 funds to fund events in fiscal year 25. And the event timeline will be from January to December of 2025. So there will be a lot more coming out about that. I know it's kind of come up on us pretty quickly, but there will be information in the paper about the process for this year.
Leaf pickup starting Monday.
Yeah, leaf pickup started this Monday. I think it will go until early December is the plan.
Till the trees are bare.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Thanks for that, Garrett. Thank you all for being here.
Please join us in keeping Fredericksburg and Gillespie County special. Be Texas friendly. Share the road. Put litter in its place. Respect private property. And protect our dark skies. Thank you for caring about our community.
The community in Fredericksburg is growing, and we know that people choose to live here, and for very good reason. It's important that we have resources in place so that people can take care of themselves, so that our economy can keep moving, so that this community can continue to thrive. And this is our opportunity to help them stay well and stay part of the community as contributing members.